right, I am here with Mr. Geoffrey Beers, also known as
the Yota Guy.
All right, and what are we doing today?
Today we are going to be doing an install kit on 488 Nitro gears on her front differential.
And what happened, or what is going on with my truck?
We don't know exactly what happened, but the bearings, the pinion bearings specifically, looks like it has failed. So there's a lot of movement in the pinion flange on the exterior of the diff, and there's a lot of noise when she's in four-wheel drive and driving in the front. So we're going to fix that. So we gotta open up the case, see what's going on inside. So we have a full master install kit and new 488 gears to go in, and we're gonna tear it apart and see what's damaged and replace it as we go and put it back together. It should be good.
So with a failed pinion bearing, what is the cause typically of that?
A lot of times failed pinion bearings, if it's just a factory install, the lack of lubrication could be an issue. There's metal debris or moisture from like a lack of a diff breather ventilation or something like that. Other thing is, if you're doing a gear install, and somebody has recently installed gears, a lot of times the pinion bearing failure would be related to improper installation, which could include things like improper preload, excessive or not enough. There could be excessive backlash or something like that. Other thing too is if they got it too tight or too loose or did an improper break-in period, you know, the bearings have to be broken in properly during a test drive and stuff when everything's set up new, so you just can't just pop in some gears and just go driving down the freeway all you want. You gotta break it in, you know, so there's lots of different causes, but pinion bearings typically don't fail from excessive off-road usage. That is something that would happen. You would break a driveline or a CV axle shaft before you fail the pinion bearing. That thing is a stout bearing. That thing is meant to hold a lot of torque and a lot of power. You'll grenade, you know, your gears before a pinion bearing fails. So. Yeah. You can see the rust on the splines. I got some penetrating oil on it, but yeah, they were a little bit seized in there from the rust that was present. So we're gonna clean that rust up, clean up the splines, have a little bit of lubricant inside there so we don't get rust buildup anymore, so that doesn't get stuck ever again. All right, so here we have Kristen's front differential drain plug. Pulled it out, and this is fairly new differential fluid. Now there's a little magnet right here, and we're noticing that instead of having the little metal dust that's typically there, there's a little bit larger chunks than normal. And for how many miles that are on this front diff, this is an excessive amount of metal that is on this magnet. Also noticing that there is metal debris suspended in the fluid, kind of gives it a little bit of a shimmeriness, kind of looks like glitter that's in the fluid. That is a definitive indication that there is some type of bearing failure on the inside of the front differential. So we're gonna be tearing this thing open and figuring out where in the heck this metal is coming from, because you don't want this stuff churning around inside your front differential. We got moving components. There's a lot of precision specifications inside here where you can't have this type of stuff going through your bearings and whatnot, because that's just not healthy for it. So let's get this thing out of here, pop it open, and see what's going on. All right, so here we have the front drive line. This is where it comes out of the transfer case and goes up to the front differential, also known as the clamshell differential assembly. Right here is the pinion flange. So this flange right here is bolted directly to the pinion gear that's inside the diff. This thing has an extreme amount of force applied on the bearings, kind of clamping it tight together, and there should be absolutely zero free play in there. Like, we're talking less than like 100,000ths of an inch of movement. That is way finer than a piece of hair. So when we grab this thing, we can expect to see how much free play that we have in it. And if you grab this right here and move it up and down, you can see how that shaft is moving. And no, it's not the U-joint, because this flange is bolted right to it, and you can see how the flange is moving. Now what that indicates is that this pinion flange, which is connected to the pinion bearing, is loose. Now this, under zero circumstances whatsoever, should this have any movement at all on your front differential or your rear differential. This indicates that the pinion bearings do not have the correct amount of preload, or they have deteriorated and are broken and are no longer a functioning piece of the differential. Oh, that's the ticket. I'm ready. Let it rip, potato chip. Got it. Oh, that's munchy. That's really munchy. Yeah, that bearing in there is gunzo. So normally I would, before I start any disassembly on any differential, I would want to measure the preload and stuff like that before I take it apart. Just because that's a good way to check the integrity of the internals and everything. When you're measuring the preload, you're measuring how much resistance it takes to turn this shaft, the pinion flange. Now, because this thing has so much free play, that is generally pointless to do at this time because I already know that that bearing failure is in there and we're gonna be disassembling this diff and replacing those components. So that spec at this point in time is practically useless to know that type of information. So we're not gonna take any measurements before removal, but when we're going back together, we're gonna make sure it's all perfectly good.
One bench wrench.
That was really easy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was really easy. See, that should have taken all our strength.
Yeah, that was like just straight out.
Fell off pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, that was not pressed on all the way. And there you have it, the pinion flange is removed. Now this shaft right here should be tight and there should be no movement here even after that pinion flange is gone because the bearings have a certain amount of preload that should be pressed on. And there is a ton of movement there. This is part of the pinion that's inside the diff. This should not move at all. Okay, we're looking at this bearing, looking for any grooves and primarily any pitting. And there is minute marks of pitting inside here.
What would that indicate if you saw
Metal particulates flowing through the bearing, but there's a lot of shadowy or kind of like a cloudiness right within there, which is not the greatest sign for how new these bearings are. There's a couple slash marks over here. I don't know if that was from installation or removal. Those do have markings that shouldn't exactly be there. A little bit of wear. There's metal all in here. There's a little bit of scuffing on the actual pinion gear drive. You can just kind of see where the metal hasn't exactly been, it's kind of been shearing, is what you can see. I don't think it's going to be a groove that you can actually fill. Technically, these gears, the way they work, the engine oil or the gear oil lubrication property should actually keep them from making contact, period. Now, these look like they've been making contact. Yeah, there is a significant pit. Clear indication of wear right there. That's on the coast side. So that's the side of when you're deaccelerating, and there's a definite pit. The other side
And that's
is the
where
drive
the noise,
side.
the noise was coming when I would decelerate.
Yep. Oh yeah, and there's an indentation right there on that rear part of that gear. Oh Jesus. Oh God. So, right here,
Whoa.
these big old notch marks.
Holy shit.
That is from the pinion. The head of this pinion has been ramming into the carrier. You have major carrier damage. That is That's unfortunate. These markings here on the carrier assembly, those were coming from the pinion. Now, this nut was loose, which means the preload was not correct. The way that these gear faces are on the coast side and the drive side, when you're on the drive side, the gears, the way that they mesh, it kind of wants to push the pinion away. And when you're on the coast side, it wants to pull the pinion into it just based on natural forces. Now, this pinion should not move at all because the pinion preload should be correct and it just doesn't allow it to move. These are really heavy duty bearings. Now, since this was not tight all the way, it was allowing the ring gear to pull in the pinion, and it was pulling it in into the point into where the teeth were shearing right into the carrier housing, doing damage not only to the carrier housing, to the pinion gear as well, and to the ring gear. And not only that, it was introducing metal particulates into the fluid assembly, or into the fluid area. And now that metal has been traveling through here, and a lot of these bearings right here that it's supposed to be riding on, they're scored. The surfaces on them, they're kind of cloudy. You can see those lines in them. That is not ideal for bearings. So it just created an all-around issue to where one thing was left undone and it pretty much destroyed everything else around it. We are going to remove the differential side carrier bearing. A lot of times you can put this on a hydraulic press and use little bearing removal tools to come underneath here and remove those, but instead we're going to use this bearing removal tool that we got from Nitro gear supply. It's a lot more efficient removal and you can use it without damaging the actual bearing surface itself. First we're going to install this piece right here. It goes over the top, and that's what the tool can be pressing on against the carrier. Then you put on the outer bearing race, goes over the top, that's going to keep the cage together as we're removing it. And then we're going to put on the removing thing on top. Now this little cutout is going to come up underneath on the side. It's going to come right up underneath that bearing on the inside there. And then this top piece up here is going to grab that cage on the top there, and it's going to lift it up. So now we fully enclose the thing into there. Put over the cap to lock it all into place. Twist the adjustment screw just to hold it. And now we tighten this nut, and hopefully this gun right here has enough power to take it out, because I don't have my big one right now, but this one should do the trick. There we go. There you have it. Perfectly removed bearing. There's our bearing and our shim.
No, maybe not.
Here's the basic order of how this goes back together inside the diff. You have the pinion, the inner pinion bearing, the inner bearing race, and then we have the solid steel spacer. Oh yeah, it goes this way. So it's going to be held in like that. And then on top of it, we have the spacer, and then it would basically be the axle nut that goes on like that, which would hold the clamping force together down like so. So the reason why this thing had so much free play is because this nut wasn't applying enough clamping force down under there, allowing too much free play in the pinion shaft. that's what caused our damage to our carrier assembly. Ever so slowly. Make sure we get all the bearing surfaces clean. The pinion. Being very careful not to touch any of the bearing races because it's very, very soft metal. It could scrape or scuff very easily. Take this guy. Okay, that's in. Now we have too much free play there, so we're gonna put on the washer real quick, just like that. I'm gonna use the old bearing, just like that. We're going to put on this nut and just kind of get it started because we need to get that pinion flange on there. And then we can set our preload. Now we've started to press down on that inner bearing. Next, we're going to get our splines a little lubricated on the pinion flange. And we're not putting in the pinion seal just yet because we are going to be setting pinion preload first. That there. That on. Now we're going to suck this down until there's no more free play. Okay, now we're working in